Hello, everyone.
Hello. Good morning.
Hello.
Welcome to Silicon Heartland in Austin. Thanks for being here. So I'm here with Jim Breyer, a wonderful, well-known venture capitalist who has done global investing and who moved from Silicon Valley to Austin 3.5 years ago. So Jim, how's it going in Austin so far? How would you compare the scene here to Silicon Valley, and do you miss Silicon Valley?
Well, I'll tell you a little bit about how the journey started. I was living and based in and around Stanford University. Many of you know it. Offices on Sand Hill Road. Many of you would know that. And I was on the board of Dell for many years. And Michael and Susan would always say to me, "How are you not in Austin, Texas? California is a great place to visit. We like visiting New York as well, but you should be in Austin." And because I was coming here at least 4 or 5 times a year, particularly when Carl Icahn was silly us, I fell in love with the city and town. Again, the cultural attributes. I love going to live music. Moody Center is a phenomenal addition to the landscape, which opened in April. University of Texas is my adopted alma mater, if you will. I went to school at Stanford and Harvard, but I find an energy and leadership quality at the University of Texas that's second to none. And I'm on 2 advisory committees with the president, Jay Hartzell. I'm actually doing a fireside chat with Jay at 4 o'clock today. And he is a gifted leader and very aspirational for using the University of Texas as a hub of innovation to further increase the amount of innovation that is occurring in Austin, Texas. And so a couple examples of that would be a medical school innovation zone, which is north by about 15 blocks. There are campuses outside of Austin where, again, who knows what Elon is thinking. He's out by Bastrop, but there will be a huge build out. And if any of you have not been to the Gigafactory, my goodness. I went to the Gigafactory a little over a year ago, and I was expecting a lot. The robots making robots, making robots. I've never seen anything like it. So we have a very good group of people from the West Coast and East Coast who have come to Austin the last 3 or 4 years. The university sits so much at the heart. We will not, in many cases, have the breakout, really deep technology types of ideas and companies that one sees in Silicon Valley or for the life sciences in Cambridge and Boston. But the breadth of the investments, the qualities, and I would also offer what I learned. I didn't appreciate this when I came. The resources, if Austin sits at the hub, the resources, for instance, I do a lot of life science, medicine, needs computation investing. The Dallas hospitals are extraordinary. You have a startup medical school, just finished its first 10 years here, Dell Med, which does not have silos of so many of our great medical schools. You have Houston, MD Anderson, arguably the best cancer center in the world. Memorial Sloan Kettering might disagree, but it's an exceptional place. And so I think what we're hoping for, stay tuned, is more formality around the partnerships between these cities and the University of Texas, Austin, and much more collaboration. Because right now, when I'm saying what I am about Austin, which I've done once or twice, my good friends up in Dallas will say, "You are not giving North Texas its due." And in Houston, I wore my UT, on my last trip to Houston, my UT gear, and the number of people who said, Houston, we're an A&M town. What are you wearing that for? So there's a lot of humor, there are a lot of Texas idiosyncrasies. But for a place to do business, it is exceptional because everything that the leaders of the state and the city by and large, entrepreneurs, certainly me as a venture capitalist, we want it to be as easy as possible for fantastic entrepreneurs to build businesses. Okay. I think being a founding executive, she or he has the most difficult job in the world. There's nothing like it. And my job as a venture capitalist advisor, I've sat on very large boards, Walmart, Dell, currently still on Blackstone. But my heart is startups and doing everything I can, and everything private capital, that we can do to help them succeed.
Sure. Well, today, or yesterday, and the day before, the big news from Silicon Valley, which is reverberating through all of these tech hubs, is Silicon Valley Bank collapse. And I'd love to hear your perspective on what do you think the impact will be for places like Austin, which has a lot of tech startups, and Boston, places outside of Silicon Valley, and the Heartland.
It is a little too early to predict. We all know this has happened extraordinarily fast. For Breyer Capital, I started hearing rumblings earlier in the week, and so 90% of Breyer Capital portfolio companies, if they didn't already have a Morgan Stanley or JP Morgan or Bank of America account, Tuesday, Wednesday, they were open. But that being said, we know it's bad. I mentioned to you, on a scale of 1 to 10, if 10 is the 2008-9 financial crisis, for the world of technology and life sciences and entrepreneurship, depending on what comes of it, will they find a buyer for certain assets? It's really dramatic. I would say the number of venture capital friends at Silicon Valley firms that called me over the last 2 days from many of the best firms in the world, Sequoia and others, wanted to compare notes because this is really dramatic. And unfortunately, a lot of companies decided, okay, we're going to put all of our raised money in Silicon Valley Bank because they're also offering us a $10 million loan. And so Silicon Valley Bank was not behaving particularly well because the more you put with them, and we all know how those discussions go, the less diversified these portfolio companies were. So my advice has always been, the money you raise, put it in a safe, great bank. If you're earning 100 less basis points on it, so be it. There's enough risk in the business. You don't want to take risk with where the money is. Right. And I don't know what this week will bring. I think we will know a lot Monday morning. Yeah. I'm of the opinion that even if portfolio companies get a significant percentage of their capital, that might have been in money market funds, where Silicon Valley Bank was the account, and then Morgan Stanley might have been where the money market funds originated from. This could take a while for the companies to get the money back. I mean, everyone's saying, we think we're going to get $250,000, which is FDIC insured, on Monday. Right. And some entrepreneurs are saying, well, we think we're going to get our money back, all of it, by end of week. I think that's very optimistic. And frankly, what is sad, because I've worked with Silicon Valley Bank, 24 years I've known the Silicon Valley Bank team, and I'm just really sad for what became a run on the bank. But these things happen. Clearly, they were not risk managing appropriately, and they never expected the last 2 years to be as bleak in terms of IPOs as they were. So again, that makes me sad, and then the fact that I know there will be a number of companies that may very well miss payroll this week. And if things don't get resolved more this week, potentially miss payroll next week. And so there are a lot of really good entrepreneurs who are looking at this and not just knocking on wood and hoping. So that's my take as to where we are today.
It's pretty bleak, and it's not just the portfolio companies, it's these venture funds too, because Silicon Valley Bank was a limited partner in many of these funds.
Absolutely.
So just how many funds was Silicon Valley Bank a limited partner in? Several, right? Dozens probably.
Oh, for sure dozens. And banked many of the general partners at venture capital funds banked with Silicon Valley Bank. So they had the capital calls for their funds would go into Silicon Valley Bank. So they had, depending on the firm, and I know many of the nuances, I won't go into the names, but some have dramatic exposure to Silicon Valley Bank, others less so. I've always been proud, knock on wood luck, Breyer Capital's backers are JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, Citi, B of A. And so even as I think about the relationships, diversification really matters. And we keep learning this lesson again and again. When we had the crypto crash of FTX, a number of really gifted investors who 3-4 years ago did nothing but crypto, then tried to find something.
Right.
November, December currently, I'd love to do life sciences AI, but they spent 4 or 5 years in crypto. And I'm looking for the brilliant 30-year-old, 32-year-old she or he from Amazon, Alphabet, Facebook, on and on, to combine with the great, call it medical talent, at UCSF, MD Anderson, Memorial Sloan Kettering, Mass General. So those specific cases, I've made 12 investments over the last 5 years, which are spin-outs of the medical institutions. We start with very defined, what we believe is world-class data, as we did with MSK. Usually the chief medical officer at the startup comes from the hospital or the medical school. And then my job, which has been for 5 years, is easier than it's ever been. Identify that A+ machine learning developers at the companies I mentioned who are ready for a change. So from that part of the business, it would be really hard, for instance, for me to recruit an absolute top technologist out of Alphabet 3 or 4 years ago, given their equity position and on and on. The people I'm meeting who are contacting me from, call it the mega caps, it's extraordinary. And so it's really exciting. There will be a lot of really great people who decide, I did my 20 years, 10 years at Alphabet, I'm ready for something.
What do you think this latest crisis with Silicon Valley Bank could help other markets outside of Silicon Valley Bank? Be an advantage for them that there are these regional banks, there are regional venture funds, and maybe they weren't so exposed. Is this an advantage for a silver lining here at all?
I would say less so as we sit here in Austin, Texas, because Silicon Valley Bank, unfortunately, as we're learning, had a very significant presence here in Austin. The portfolio companies have invested in Dallas. Now they're diversifying a little more, but their relationships were not with Silicon Valley Bank. And then as you get a little bit farther away, in terms of some other great cities, you visited Pittsburgh, Columbus, there's very little exposure. Boston has a lot. It's really surprising, but certainly after the Bay Area, Boston's right there in terms of number of companies that have significant resources at Silicon Valley.
All right, and Pittsburgh not so much, even though Pittsburgh's a really good hub with Carnegie Mellon University
Yep.
and Columbus with Ohio State University and Ann Arbor.
Based on everything I know, and we're only 3 or
Yeah.
4 days into it, but I do think, one, I'm a very big believer in universities sitting at the heart of where innovation will occur going forward for
Right.
any number of reasons. My understanding is in some of those university settings, there's much less Silicon Valley exposure, much less.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the venture capital model is pretty different in the heartland than Silicon Valley. There's venture development organizations that are part government financed and city and state and private enterprise all in one. And those are organizations like Jumpstart in Cleveland and Centrifuge in Cincinnati and Elevate in Indiana and others.
Yep.
And they've had a huge impact in moving the heartland forward. So they would not be as exposed to this. So I just wonder what the future of Silicon Valley will be. Is this going to impact housing costs? Housing costs? People are going to, if they weren't already laid off, they're going to be unemployed and maybe moving. We already saw a lot of workers relocating to the Midwest.
Absolutely.
With the ability to work anywhere and lower living costs in the heartland. So this may escalate this whole trend.
I never am 100%. As an investor, I'm retesting hypotheses, running probabilities. Just in the last 2 days, the number of outreach texts and emails from great people at great companies in Silicon Valley has gone like this. And the flow was already dramatic.
Right.
But it has gone straight up, and some of these people, again, are extraordinary.
Sure.
But as we know, there have been big layoffs in big tech the last 6 months. The rumor is my former many-year board membership, Facebook, Meta, another round of layoffs will be coming this week, another 10%.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of good people as being laid off. It's not, some people will say, well, they're only laying off 20% of the workforce, and so they're taking out the bottom 20%. Well, I know for a fact at Alphabet, that's not how it worked.
Okay. Right. Well, you were an original